Welcome back to another episode of KKC Consulting. Today we've got a guest who's been asked several times, Dr. Mohamad Sawwaf, the founder and CEO of Manzil. But before we really delve in, we have to realize that he used to be the senior regional manager of TD when he decided to just leave all of that and start up Manzil, one of the biggest Islamic fintech companies on the planet. Dr. Mohamad, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me, Amar.
Of course. How are you doing today?
Good, alhamdulillah. Good.
Alhamdulillah.
Ramadan's keeping us busy for sure.
It is. How do you cope with, the whole Ramadan stress?
Yeah, listen, Ramadan in the West is a lot different than in the East,
A lot
for
different.
sure. Our schedules are very different. Alhamdulillah, of course, like with Menzel and having the ability to kind of have control and over your schedule, we try and accommodate the month as much as possible. We're fortunate enough to be a Muslim-owned organization. We kind of have control over our schedules, and of course, we're empathetic to those that are practicing and want to be accommodated. It's still tough because the work never stops.
Right.
The clients, need our support. Our service providers are still kind of 9 to 5. And so what we find is, maybe there's a little bit of lower productivity, which is fine. And we try and share that as much as we can with those that aren't Muslim to say, hey, we've been behind on this, or, we haven't gotten to you as quickly as you expected just because of, the month of Ramadan. And they're usually, not only do they acknowledge it, but they understand it, and they're quite accommodating to that. So alhamdulillah, I would say, last 10 days is always, the most blessed, but it's also, the most amount of time and commitment. And, it becomes kind of a bittersweet moment because you know that the end is reaching, right?
Mhm.
Every day that we, leave in terms of Ramadan is one less day that we have, right? And then we can only focus on the next year, that inshallah that we're alive by then, to be able to experience it once again.
And I feel, going back to the point that you mentioned, the last 10 days is always a little iffy for me, just in the sense that Eid's coming up, but Ramadan's also leaving. Right? You don't know whether to be happy or sad sometimes, but
Yeah, that's why it's bittersweet, right? Like everyone's prepping for kind of both at the same time.
yeah.
We hold a community salah and Eid event, and there's prep for that, and so you get excited about the prep,
Right.
but then you get upset because it's the end of the month is nearing. So you're straddling between those two emotions at all times, but may Allah reward our efforts. Yours and ours and everyone else that's practicing this month and that's on their journey. And all we can ask is that whatever we ask in terms of during our prayers and all of the requests that we make, all of the charity that we've done, all of the family get-togethers, that all that's accepted as blessings and thawab, and for our akhirah at the end of the day.
Inshallah. And, going back to the whole idea of, the get together, we recently had the iftar, the Manzil iftar, and
Yeah,
that was super fun. Very, very
I'm
fun.
happy you enjoyed that. And yeah, again, bringing the team together, we're a fully remote team, as you know.
Yeah.
So bringing them together and using these types of occasions to bring them together is always fulfilling. I think it's great just for everyone to catch up, kind of let loose, and always try and put that Islamic feel around that, because we're very, very core. The religion is core to our business. It's core to the people, the employees that participate in this organization, and we want to celebrate that. There shouldn't be a reason why you should hide away from it, and we want to share that with others around us that are even non-Muslim, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. So it's we were happy and thrilled that everyone showed up, and we get to support local businesses at the same time. We get to break bread, have great conversations. It was great. It was great to see everyone.
It was. Would you say that Islam being at the core of the business, would you regard that as like a superpower for Manzil?
I do, because even if you go on our culture page,
Yes.
we always say that God before people and then people before profit.
Mhm.
Most of the time, in a corporate social responsibility nature, or if you think about like social responsible investing or impact investing, or what is a good impactful kind of way of doing business and the social responsible, people always say put people ahead of profit, and profit comes. That's great. With Menzel, we took a step back and we said, well, we agree that people should be above profit, but we also felt that there was kind of a tertiary level that need to be introduced, is having this conscious mindfulness of God. Because if you are constantly reminded and doing the work that you're supposed to be doing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then of course the people will benefit and the profit will come,
Right.
right? And so this has become kind of a main tenet within Menzel as an organization, within the employees. And a lot of people actually feel that, there isn't, let's call it, subjectivity within the work. There is this sense of altruism.
Mhm.
There is this sense of we're doing this not just for ourselves, but for others, which is the community, but also for a legacy. And a lot of people want to participate in our organization in many ways because they want that aspect of building a legacy, something that they can build towards their akhirah and not just about the dunya. They benefit from both, right? They're building stuff from the dunya and people get to benefit from that, but that also translates into the akhirah.
Mhm.
And I think one of our superpowers is having the ability to attract talent that, we get all the time, like a requester saying, I just want to be part of this. I just want to be part of this because it's good for my deen, it's good for my akhirah. And for those that are non-Muslim watching, like deen is just our level of religiosity, and akhirah is the hereafter. And they just want to work with us just for that. Like no matter what the work is itself, because there's fulfillment. There's a higher level of fulfillment that someone can achieve or attain versus kind of what they're already doing.
It's an interesting topic you touched on because even for me personally, right, I try to look at things with a purpose in mind, right? Whether it's even this podcast, school, I'm inshallah creating an app in the future. So even that as a whole, whatever it might be, I feel that when you have a purpose and when you sit aside and say, all right, why am I doing this? Because at the end of the day, if you're doing something solely for money, you're going to burn out of steam at the end of the day. There's a Bollywood movie, and I never watch Bollywood movies, but there's one that I watched maybe 7 years ago called Three Idiots, right? And they had this one quote that stuck with me ever since I heard it. Don't chase money, chase after excellence, because when you chase after excellence, money will chase after you.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that quote. I really do. And going back to your keyword, legacy, I understand why Manzil is regarded as that. Like, even, and I guess this is a little bit into the recruitment process for me. When I was, when I became a part of the team, I learned about Abdul Mateen's story with Manzil as well. And I learned about his values. And I'll be very honest with you, one of the main reasons that I said yes to Manzil on the spot was because of Abdul Mateen's story and the way he came into Manzil. But also, I regard him as a proper leader, as someone who cares about how Manzil is run. And that can only happen with a great CEO who cares about his employees as well, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And listen, Abdul Mateen is great. He's well rounded. He's got his fingers in everything, and he does drive excellence, right? And that's what a leader's supposed to do. Is you look at things differently. We don't look at things in a way where we want to micromanage people. It's more about we want to make you better. We want to bring out that potential out of you, and bring it to a level that people regard and revere as excellence. And when I established Manzil from day one, the thought process was always, how do we create a professional experience, a professional approach, a professional kind of client-facing website, app, uh, products, services, and interaction. And I think that goes a long way, kind of knowing the history of Islamic finance in Canada hasn't been like that. Because establishing that trust and credibility with Canadian Muslims as consumers really requires a conscious effort to say, well, what are they currently experiencing with the banks that are out there? And the experience is great, right? It's very professional. People trust Canadian banks with their money. They know that it's safe. They know it's secure. We had to build something like that uh, so that we could say, you know what? We've built systems in place that are similar, and you can trust us too. It's all about reputational risk. The last thing we want is for some sort of breach of trust, and then we have nothing after that. Because you always hear, you know, any great leader say it can take years or decades to build, but 5 minutes to fall apart. And so we're very, very conscious about mitigating all of those risks and ensuring that the experience with the client is second to none, and that they then have a great feeling and this level of comfort to say, my money's safe, my money is deployed in a way that agrees with my faith and the way I look at things. It's compatible, and then they'll share it with their friends and family, right? Which is the highest form of thanks. Really, is not just the client coming onto our platform themselves and using a product or two or all. It's, will they actually recommend us to friends and family? And that is the highest form of flattery.
Mhm. It's a great topic that you touched upon because an entrepreneur I really look up to, probably familiar with him, Alex Ramosi, right? And while reading 100 Million Leads, like his book, he mentions that the most powerful, single-handedly, the most powerful tactic you can employ is being so good that people give you referrals. Because it's a domino effect. When you tell one person, they tell another, they tell another. And after a long time, you build more and more trust, which equates to higher revenue, higher growth as a whole. But putting that to aside, let's talk about the bread and butter of this podcast, right? I want to just dive right in. Can you talk to me about how halal mortgages work?
Absolutely. What I will say, just on the point of leads and referrals, is, right now, Menzel attracts about 500 to 1,000 clients a month. We don't know where they come from.
Wow.
We don't know where they come from.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've built a reputation that is positive within the marketplace. We do look at ourselves as category creators in the Islamic finance space in Canada, as well as a category leader. And every day, I look at the data and I see that, a dozen or 2 dozen people sign up. And I have no idea who they are or where they come from all parts of the country. So we know that the system's working.
Right.
And this, by the way, is without any active marketing.
Yeah, that was
Like, we have social media presence, we have Google presence, you can search us up. Our SEO is pretty good, our content's pretty good, but we're not actively spending money on marketing. So I know that from a grassroots perspective, a kind of inbound, organic growth marketing funnel, it's working. I always say to myself, well, if we put some dollars towards some active marketing, what would that look like, right? And yeah, of course, there's conversion metrics that could be higher, but people are finding us, and we know that we have product market fit. People want this stuff, they find it with us, and they're willing to do whatever they can to get it. So it's good. So that leads us into the halal mortgage program that Manzil set up. And I always tell people that in order for you to understand the difference between a halal mortgage and a conventional one, it really comes back down to the the presence of understanding how money works in Islam or how it's viewed. And if you can't understand that, then the halal mortgage is very difficult to understand because your automatic reaction is going to be, well, it's the same. The numbers are the same. The outcome is the same. So why are you doing it this way? Just do it normally, right? And I tell people in Islam, money has no value, right? Money is a means to an end in Islam.
Right.
Money, it should be used as a medium to buy assets, right? And if you have a like for like transaction, meaning I give you money and you give me more money, this is impermissible. This is what we call riba or usury, which is making something out of nothing, right? With zero effort,
I see.
right?
Hmm.
If you can't understand that concept, it's very hard for you to understand, well, why is interest forbidden? Well, interest is just making money off of money. There was no effort put into place. It wasn't used to create economic value, right? It wasn't used to produce revenues or cash flows or a profit directly, not indirectly, right? You could say, well, yeah, I took that money, I bought a business, and then that business then produced cash flows. Well, then why don't you tie your return to the cash flows of the business versus to the actual dollar amount that you gave me? That would make it Sharia compliant, right? But tying it to the dollar value that you gave me isn't the right mechanism. And I always bring up this analogy. Everyone understands this. If I were to put two steaks in front of you, and my favorite cut is a ribeye. So one ribeye here, one ribeye there, and I say, pick the one that is halal. And I'm telling you, one of them is halal and one of them is not. But pick the one that is halal. Neither of us, nor anybody in this room, would be able to figure it out. We could guess it right, but I couldn't be like, oh yeah, just by looking at it, this is the halal one. And I use that as an example because if I say, well, the one on the right is halal and the one on the left isn't, you'll say, well, what makes this halal? And I'll say the process was different. The cow was treated in a very humane way. It was slaughtered in a humane way. The blood was fully drained. While it was being slaughtered, it was preyed upon by the individual, like in the name of the god. And so you'll be like, okay, that makes sense. Like there's a process. So when I tell people, well, this mortgage is $2,500 a month, and this mortgage is $2,500 a month, pick the halal one. You're like, oh, I don't know. They both are $2,500 a month. And I say, well, this one's halal. And then you say, well, why is that one halal? And then I say, well, the process is different. And in addition to that, the documentation is different, right? And so a halal mortgage, there's a couple of ways to do it. Menzel does, these two ways. You can have a murabaha, which is basically like a cost plus profit type of transaction. Or you can do a musharaka, which is more like a shared equity mortgage program or a partnership style mortgage program. And the murabaha is very easy. You find a house or a condo apartment that you like, and you go out there and you offer the price that you're willing to pay. And let's just call it $500,000 for this example. So you've secured this property on paper. You haven't closed on it yet, right? So you've negotiated the deal between you and the seller, and they're okay. You would come to us as Manzil and say, "Hey guys, I bought this property. I need a halal mortgage on this, and what can you do?" We'll say, "Okay, well, we would have to buy this property on your behalf for 500,000, and then once it's in our ownership, we'll sell it back to you. But because you can't pay for it in cash, which is 500,000, and you want to pay it off in installments, we're going to put a premium on that. So we'll say, hey, we're going to make this calculation, and then let's say we come back to you and say it's $750,000 over 25 years. So you divide that by 25 years, which is 300 months, and then you get a payment plan of $2,500 a month. So $2,500 a month every month for the next 25 years or 300 months. And by the end of it, you've fully paid it off and it's yours. By the way, you get ownership up front, like you're on title. We just helped you finance it, right?
I see.
It's a very simple model. Did I, in this transaction, give you any money?
I feel like it's a trick question.
It's not, because I didn't. I bought the house.
You're right. You're
I
right.
bought the house that you asked me to buy.
Right.
The house was in my possession. And then I sold you that house. I didn't give you money and say, give me more money back, which is, you could do that with any bank in Canada. But what I did is I used my money that I collect, right, through investors that fund the Manzil Mortgage Fund. And I take that money and I buy that property. So again, not like for like transaction. Money got turned into an asset, which is the house. And then I took that house and then I said, knowing that you want it, here it is for a premium because you don't have the cash to pay for it up front. That's why I paid for it for $500,000. You want the convenience of installments. And so I'm giving it to you for $2,500 a month, and we agree to that, and you make those payments. That's the difference here. I never lent you any money. I used the money as a means to an end of acquiring this asset class or this commodity. And you wanted it from me, so I sold it to you at a price we pre-agreed upon. And that's it. The other way is to say, hey, let's do it together. Let's go on this journey together as partners, and we're going to buy this $500,000 home. What are you going to do? You're going to put maybe your position of money, which is minimum 20%, but let's just say 50% in this example. 50% you put in, I put in 50%. So now we're 50-50 owners. You put in 250,000 of the 500, I put in 250,000 of the 500. Did I give you my money? Did you give me your money? No. We both used our money to buy this house together. Now, I don't want to use the house. I don't care to use it. You want to live in it. I say, okay, that's fine. And you want the ability to buy me out over time. That's fine. So we agree on, let's say $1,500 a month or $2,000 a month in terms of a payment to me. But what are you doing? You're buying my shares or my equity of the house.
Okay.
So we start off as 50-50. And next month you give me a payment. Maybe I go down to 49% ownership and you go up to 51% ownership. Then I go 48, 52, 47, 53, all the way up until you get to 100 and all the way down until I get to 0. And then you have full ownership of the house. I don't want to live in the house. I have my own home. I don't need to participate in the upkeep, in the maintenance, in the day-to-day. I'm giving you that right in exchange for you buying me out over a set amount of time at a certain price per month. That's it. So that's how a halal mortgage works under the terms of murabaha or musharaka, as I just mentioned right now.
I like how you brought in the different examples to touch on it, right? Because for me personally, like it's maybe 2 years ago, I was speaking to a family friend, right? And I asked him, like, yo, why didn't you get a halal mortgage, right? It's a little bit iffy, especially in Islamic context when you search in the Quran the effects of it. Now, he mentioned that what essentially was going on in the masjid, right? The nearby masjid was the masjid would take a loan from the bank and then essentially just charge you a premium on it. So it was like they were a middleman in it. So ever since then, he just had detrimental reputation of, halal mortgages. He thought that, they didn't exist as a whole. But I'm glad that you decided to make a change on that aspect.
Yeah, listen, Islamic finance pre-Menzel in Canada was, I would like to say, in the gray zone. a lot of people that came out as operators. Many of them, I like to say, like, are auntie and uncle shops, right? So not that professional, and they didn't have a quality product. Not just the product, but they also didn't have a sustainable business model. And so, yeah, we've seen instances of, well, you're still facilitating a loan agreement between the client and the bank, and we're going to give you this side agreement that says, well, to do it this way is Sharia compliant or halal, or we'll source some fatwa, whereby the scholar will be in agreement. And maybe they use some form of durura, or they use, the concept of the West, right, as part of their reasoning or justification. But it's still wrong, because you are telling a people that it's okay, and those people will do it because they're looking at you as a center of influence, as a student of knowledge, as a scholar. But the way I look at it is, well, did you do enough work and due diligence to come to that reasoning or to come to that conclusion? Before Menzel, the sentiment within the Muslim community was Islamic finance can never happen because the laws are too restrictive. You have the Bank Act of Canada, the Interest Act of Canada, the Mortgage Act of Canada. There's tax rules, there's regulations, there's a bunch of things. And this is why it took us 3 years, right? So from 2017 to 2020, we were in R&D mode, research and development mode. And it took us 3 years of working with, the best Bay Street law firms in the country, working with the best, tax advisory firms and consulting firms, Sharia advisors globally, right, that understood common law and common law jurisdictions to say, how can we design a product within the confines and the restraints of the Interest Act of Canada, Bank Act of Canada, Mortgage Act of Canada, and the tax laws, without compromising, the credibility and the validity of the product, right? And so literally it was this exercise of fitting a square peg in a round hole, and just forcing it into, let's call it this 3-dimensional design of saying that, you know what, even though we didn't have the ability to change laws, we found a working solution that we were comfortable with, that we could actually sell to the consumer base. And so after Menzel came into the market, there was, I would say, still a lot of skepticism around, like, well, maybe you're just faking it. Everybody before you was working in this gray zone and they told us why. So why are you not telling us the truth? Or you're hiding something. And then there was also, some people within the community that were, like, completely shocked that it could be done. Like, if this was true, wow, like, this is something that we've never thought we would ever actually happen, right? It was an impossible feat. And not that, we're any smarter. I would just say that, like, we weren't willing to compromise on our faith. We weren't willing to compromise or settle on, that aspect of the product solution in order to put something out there, and then have to, like, justify to people, like, guys, we know it's not 100%, but just use it anyways, and we'll make it better. We didn't want to do that. It was either good enough or not good at all. And it took a lot of education, branding, awareness, professionalism, customer service, in order for us to get to where we are today. And we're still doing that, right? Like, we haven't stopped. It's not like we've gotten through to all of the 2 million Muslims in Canada. We haven't even visited every city in Canada yet. We visited a lot of them, and we presented to a lot of them. But Menzel is still not a household name, as many people might think it is. We look at it very differently, right? Like until we have 2 million Muslims as clients, then we'll say, yeah, we reached saturation and we'll move into other markets, which we're already doing. But until then, our focus is on making sure that the product is developed in a way that is compliant with the faith and compliant with, Canadian rules and regulations and laws. We want to ensure that the experience is, equivalent to a banking experience that you would get in Canada, a digital one
Right.
to be specific, because we don't have branches. As much as our community would love to meet with us in person, and that still happens from time to time, but just not on a regular basis, we're completely digital. And that's taken a bit of getting used to, right? Especially with a community that, likes to be handheld and loves that social, one-on-one, personable relationships. Or, generally is high maintenance, right? They just have a lot of questions. They want accessibility. There's a sense of immediacy with everything. And we're doing our best to fulfill that.
You know what? On behalf of all the Muslims in Canada, I do want to say thank you. Just because being able to have this option, and obviously in 5, 10, 15 years, inshallah, this is going to go in a very, very great direction, right? Because it's a bit unfortunate to see, but I mean, I guess a little bit about myself then. When I first moved here, right, obviously it was hard on me, but I would say it's a lot harder on my parents, right? They came here, they sacrificed everything. We left Bahrain, a place that's very, as you mentioned, handheld, right? Like they fill up the gasoline in your car.
Yeah,
You don't have
yeah,
to go IKEA and build all that stuff. They do it for you, right? So we left that, came to Canada, massive shock. Culturally, financially, whatever early you can bring out, shock there, right? Now, my parents had a massive hard time because over there it's very common to be on rent, right? To be on rent
yeah.
or just to own the house, it's very, very common. Over here, it's like the norm to get a mortgage that you're gonna have to pay for like 30 years and then constantly have to like be super scared about it. Some people have to take second mortgages. That's
Mm-hmm.
how bad it's become now, right? And just watching my parents go through that struggle while I was growing up, it's really had an impact on me personally. So I guess thank you for that.
Oh, you're most welcome. Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, the way we look at it is we're doing a service for the community that wasn't there before. And we want to do it in a way that we can build on kind of the foundations that we put together, several years ago. And these are just building blocks. And as long as we continually do this with the consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in mind, and this consciousness of that this is for the akhirah, and the consciousness of this is for the community, like it's community before self, then it will automatically thrive, right? And the people that are part of the organization, the people that are supporting the organization externally, the many partners and service providers and community organizations, all of them see that. And they're the ones that kind of keep it together. They're the ones that help it grow. They're the ones that, that have come to me and said, Mohamad, this is like the last chance. Like you got to get it right. And it felt like a big burden. And I still feel like it's a big burden and responsibility on my shoulders because I do feel that if Menzel's not there anymore, I think we take many steps back. And so the community has come out, they've supported, alhamdulillah. There's a lot more still required. We haven't even touched the surface. We're probably like 1% of the way there. But that just means that the journey is going to be very long and exciting
A legacy.
because, yeah, and lots of products will come out. And, who knows if we do end up building out bank branches because we feel the need for that. We want to enter into communities we've never entered before, and we don't want them to feel isolated or desolate. We want them to know that there is a company working on their behalf to solve this problem. And that at some point, they no longer need to financially exclude themselves from participating in banking and financial services in Canada. We will be that one-stop shop for them, and they don't have to compromise on their faith.
That's fair. Keeping all things in mind, right? You mentioned that many communities want to get together, and there's many plus points going for Manzil, but what would you say are some of the challenges that you guys are facing?
Many challenges. Canada is not an I don't want to say not an easy one, but it's not conducive for an entrepreneurial environment. What do I mean by that? It's very difficult to run a startup in Canada, especially a regulated startup. Manzil's fully regulated. We have, 10 regulators, 10 provincial regulators and 3 territorial regulators.
Wow.
And we're multi-product. So that means multiple regulators as a result. And I tell people that not only is that something that we have to comply with, because again, we're in Canada, but there's also a second regulation piece, which is the Sharia compliance, like the halalness of the business. And just like any company that has a board of directors and external auditors and internal auditors and advisors, we have to do that twice. For the secular side of the business, which is front facing towards the regulators and all these service providers and audit financials and all that stuff, we have to do it as well on the Sharia side. So there's a Sharia compliance element here at multiple levels, meaning we have a 3-member Sharia supervisory board, we have internal and external Sharia advisors, external auditors, and so we are doubly regulated. I tell people we self-regulate to one, which is the Sharia side, to ensure that the clients trust us, the Islamic finance industry trusts us, the partners, the peers. We have to act at their level. And then, of course, you need the compliance and trust of the Canadians, right? And so all of that makes it not just difficult, but it's time consuming. It's resource consuming financially and non-financially. And when you're in this space and doing all of this good work, you still have to be compliant on both those fronts. Canada is not that great for attracting investment, especially internationally, I would say. There are elements where Canada is just kind of an unknown country, too small. If you think about our population size, it's equal to that of California or New York, right? So they're like, well, why would I invest in something that's 1/10 in a market that size that's 1/10 versus I could just do this in the States and
UK as well.
UK too? Yeah, absolutely. So there's also currency risk. A lot of times international investors are pegged to the USD. So you invest in something that's Canadian, the dollar goes the wrong way, your return is diminished as well as a result of that. So that's also an aspect. And then of course they look at this as like, well, you're in such a niche market, right? Out of 40 million, you're focusing on 2 million, right? Which is 5% of Canada. They don't understand that maybe there's 2 billion Muslims in the world, right? Yeah, we're not a global company right now, but we are in multiple markets. Like we're getting ready to expand into the US,
right.
And we're looking at other entities globally to establish a footprint there via acquisition. So there's a lot of elements that could work against us, but we've survived and thrived nonetheless. And so having this mentality of like prove them wrong mentality is always something that I've kept close to me because I know I see what they don't see. I know what they don't know. And probably maybe for them it's just a fear of the unknown, right? Uh and maybe they're just ill-informed, right? Because obviously, there are investors that are quite sophisticated and they have very strong academic and educational backgrounds and professional backgrounds. But when it comes to this stuff, it's just like they freeze. And so I don't think it's a lack of them understanding finance. Uh, Maybe it's just that you know it's not their cup of tea, right?
Mhm.
Uh, it hasn't been proven out. They don't have, if you say, well, how would you compare Menzel to another Canadian peer? Like, we don't have any. We don't have any from the perspective of what's out there that's fully 100% digital. Like, we're the only ones. What's out there that's a multi-product platform? We're the only ones, right? What's out there that's 100% Canadian wide? We're the only ones out there. So, yeah, are there individual halal mortgage companies out there? Yeah. Are they digital? No. Are they across the country? No. So that's what I mean. Like, so when an investor comes and says, "Well, you guys are the first doing this, and I can't find a local example, even a North American one," like I would say that that holds true across North America. There's tons of mortgage shops, halal mortgage shops in the U.S. There is multiple uh, investment fund shops, halal investment fund shops that are out there, and a couple of digital providers. But there's not one doing all of that. And so that's a unique value proposition that we bring to the table. That I think is a disruptor in the industry. And especially if you're going to be across North America and focusing on a North American clientele where the Muslim community has very, very strong buying power, has very, very strong incomes and balance sheets. I think as niche as it is, you're getting a very high quality clientele that is going to be above and beyond the average that you see out there, right? There are providers out there like digital investment advisor platforms, in the GCC, in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, where maybe their average account size is like $100. It's
I see.
very, very small. And you need hundreds of thousands or millions of clients to build up a decent AUM. With Menzo, our average client is $30,000, right? So what is that? Like 300 times $100? So I could come to you and say, yeah, if you want to compare us to those guys, their average account size is $100, ours is 30,000. And yeah, maybe they're playing in a pool that has much more like a stronger concentration or a higher concentration of Muslims that they can go after. But because of my model and the type of clients we're attracting, I can have 300 times less the
Yeah,
clientele,
right.
right? Which is a much more operation efficient, company than these guys. And so what's better? It's a quality versus quantity thing.
A lot less variable costs, you would say, right?
A lot less variable cost, a lot less, human personnel that would be required to service that number of clients. Uh, and at the end of the day, we're going after quality because, again, uh, by virtue that we're already in the West versus in the East. And it's a much more stickier client, right? When somebody's willing to commit that much money to an organization as an investment, or even take on a mortgage of 500,000 or 600,000 with us, that's the biggest purchase they're ever going to make in their life. That's probably the biggest kind of liability on their balance sheets that they're going to have in their life. And they're willing to do that commitment with us. They're willing to commit to us for up to 25 years. It's a very long lasting relationship with a very strong client lifetime value, right? And again, our client acquisition cost is zero,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're getting all of this for free, and you're establishing one of the longest, right, relationships that you can ever, with very strong balance sheets behind them. It's certainly a recipe for success.
Would you say that one of the reasons your CAC is zero, apart from the marketing side, is perhaps because the value proposition? From an outsider perspective, it seems a little bit like Apple in the sense that all your products are interconnected and you're one entity that has all these products together. Similar to Apple with, the MacBooks, AirPods, they're all connected. Would you say that's one of the reasons why the CAC's so low?
Yeah, creating a halal financial ecosystem has been part of the plan from day one. And, there are multiple studies out there that tell you that you can literally create um, an indefinite relationship with a client if you were to put, I think, 4 to 7 products around them. And so, a product could be just an RSP account, and another product could be a TFSA account. It doesn't mean that, like those two products equal one product because they're still under the Menzel Invest brand. No, not at all. A mortgage is a product. Our wills is another product. Maybe they're engaging with a real estate team, which is another service or product, right? Maybe they've donated to our foundation. Maybe they've engaged with our zakat calculator and donated to their zakat or their alms through one of our partners. All of that is the ecosystem. And we've always told ourselves as an organization that we want to take care of the client from cradle to grave, right? From when they're born to when they leave this earth. And we can create products that are relevant at certain life stage cycles. Maybe you don't have money to buy a house from us. That's fine. Maybe you're a student. Maybe you just want, an investment account. And even what would be easier than that is like a savings account or checkings account, which we're working on and we want to bring into the market, inshallah, later this year. So all of these things we're very cognizant of in terms of how do we attract kind of all demographic groups or all age groups of this particular demographic so that they start with us and they start to build their life with us together. We want to be on that journey together. They're going to get married and they're going to have kids and they're going to want to retire at some point. All of these things are life stage cycles that we want to participate in. We want to be the first call when you think about, well, now I need to buy a house. Now I'm going to go back to Menzel. Oh, I have some retirement planning I need to think about. I'm going to open up an RSP account. I am retired and start to draw from that and I need to start planning for my estate. Menzel wills, right? So that's the way we look at things. And that's the ecosystem that we're creating here because this is the legacy that we can build even beyond, me and anyone else that's participating in this now.
Right. It's very interesting that you brought that into light because, like when I first started to look into Manzil, right? I started to look into different places, and obviously when you get into the Islamic finance realm, you start to see different players as well. And I realized that this is kind of going back to what you said earlier on. Canada really has very, very, very little, especially when you compare to the US, UK, and obviously I mean the Middle East, right? But when I was taking a look at the UK, looking at the podcasts that they have, several guests that they can get, several. But when you take a look at, you can literally just search on LinkedIn, Islamic finance, Toronto, Ontario. Very few people come up. And if they do come up, mad respects towards them, but they don't have as much qualifications as I would say maybe the UK players have as well. Keeping that in mind as perhaps a challenge, how's Munzel shifted through that?
Yeah, so you'll probably hear this from me for the first time, but I say this all the time, is Canada's the last G7 country to adopt any sort of Islamic banking framework or playbook. Canada is again, we talk about the challenges, we talked about, barriers and and issues of being a startup in this world. We're very happy with monopolies and oligopolies, right? We like what we know, and we don't want to introduce competition. We don't want to introduce innovation, which leads to competition in any of these kind of large industries, whether it be the airline industry, the railway industry, the banking industry, the grocery industry, the telecom industry, and there's many others that I can name, right? Like pretty much every industry has, you know, half a dozen to a dozen key players, if not less. So when you look at the States and you look at the UK and France and Germany, Australia, there are real active efforts happening there. And a lot of it comes down to political will.
Yeah.
And it's not just about political will from government, which is highly needed, right? The government needs to send a signal. And we played a role in that in the last couple of years to send to the signal to the market that, the terminology of halal banking, halal mortgages, halal finance is okay. And, that if people were to do it, that they would support it.
Mm-hmm.
So in spring of 2024, there was a budget piece that came out explicitly stating, a consultation process for halal mortgages that we were behind. Alhamdulillah. Never before, right? Like in Canada's 150-year or 160-year history since 1867, it's never been stated in that manner.
Legacy.
And that's just the start. We haven't finished, like we haven't implemented anything, and there's a lot of work happening with the Department of Finance at the federal level to do it. But there's now examples out of Alberta where they've introduced legislation to expand the definition of interest to include profit. They've also gotten rid of double land transfer tax matters when it comes to, these murabaha style transactions. And from my understanding, that's legislation is now passed. So it's happening. It's there. We're working with the Ontario government on this. I'm now working with the Manitoba government on this. And the theme is that nobody's working together. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to go from government to government, from provincial to federal, sometimes even municipal, to make this happen. And when we talk about a lack of players in the industry, a lack of experts in the industry, I'm doing all of this alone. Not that I want to, right? But one, maybe there are experts that want to help, but they can't, or they don't know how to help, or they don't look at it as a beneficial exercise for them directly. But I just look at it as there's an industry that needs to be created here. And it'll benefit not only 2 million Muslims, but it'll actually benefit 40 million Canadians.
And the economy.
And the economy. This is GDP. This is jobs. This is, economic diversification. We've trained hundreds of lawyers on Islamic finance. We've trained bankers on Islamic finance. We've trained, accountants and auditors and consultants on Islamic finance. So we're actually building the capacity for a strong and like halal investment or halal banking industry in Canada. And that capacity building is from a personnel perspective, from a financial perspective, a non-financial perspective, from an academic perspective, right? I used to be the teaching assistant for the only Islamic finance course in Canada at the Rotman School of Management alongside Professor Walid Hijazi. We taught that course for multiple years. And it's no longer there, but there's no reason why we can't bring that back. Mm-hmm. There's no reason why we can't bring back an actual degree program for Islamic finance like the UK does. Like you can go to anywhere in the UK to any one of their colleges or universities and actually get a certification or a degree in Islamic banking. But what happens there versus here is everyone says, well, where's the job that I can get with this degree? In the UK, it's very easy. And even from the UK, you can hop into the Middle East with a 5 or 6 hour flight and say, hey, I'm an expert in this stuff. Find me a job. No problem. In Canada, that's not the case. Every time we taught that course, at the end of the semester, the students were always like, what can we do with this knowledge? Where can I go get a job? And we're like, not here. Right? It's good that you know this stuff and it gives you a global perspective, and you understand kind of two different financial systems and how they can work together. But kids want jobs, right? You go to school, you want a career. And yeah, you can take this one course as an elective and it's cool. And you find it so cool that you want to do something with it, but there's nothing available. So all of these aspects need to be built out in Canada. And I can't build it alone. I'm happy to continue on this path, but I would expect that there'd be more and more people that come along the way that want to support the capacity building of this industry.
It's important, right? It's important that when you start something out, usually what happens is people, especially key players, I would say, like in the federal level, provincial level, they will try helping you out. But, inshallah, you'll be able to get that.
Inshallah.
Moving on, this is actually very interesting. But when I first had a chat with you, right, we scheduled a chat. You were kind enough to hop on the call. And I honestly wanted to come in Munzo in a sales role. So when I asked you, how is do you guys need any BDRs by any chance? But then you told me something that was super shocking. You don't need any sales work to be done. And I was confused at first. But then I watched another podcast of yours where you said that you had a waiting list of 12,000 families. 12,000. Can you talk to me about how, we touched upon it earlier on, but how can you even do that?
Yeah, so it's actually much higher than that now. I don't even know what the number is, but it's probably 15 or 16,000. And not to say that we have a wait list. Okay, like alhamdulillah, we have lots of funding. We're actively funding deals. Anyone that has any sort of inclination to buy or transfer, like buy a new property or transfer their current mortgage within the next 3 to 6 months, like we're happy to take you on, right? The wait list has been curated over the last several years. When we had a low amount of funds, and then of course, the markets are cyclical, and so timings change for people. Some people have moved on. Some people are still waiting, and some people are ready to go now, right? So I don't want people to get discouraged that there is a waiting list. Like if you're ready to go today, if you're ready to go in the next 3 weeks, 3 months, we're happy to deal with you today. Like we're turning around pre-approvals in less than a week, 2-3 days even at some point for most people, because they're ready to go. They have their documentation already, and we're happy to service that. Now, with respect to the sales role that you spoke about, for us, it's not just about going out there and trying to bring people onto our platform, but it's about how can we actually service their needs. And yeah, if somebody has a mortgage that they want to transfer, then that's a serviceable need. If somebody is looking to buy, we can set them up with our real estate team. We can pre-approve them ahead of time. That's a serviceable need. If somebody wants to open up investment accounts, they can do that today within the next 5 to 10 minutes. Just go online, open up your own account. It's a 5-10 minute process. You can fund it with as little as $1.
Right.
And and maybe people need help along the way to do that. That's a serviceable need. Wills is the same thing. It's a fully digitized program. You can do it within 15-20 minutes. You might need some assistance along the way. That's a serviceable need. Education is a need. People need to learn about Islamic finance. People have a lot of preconceived notions
Yeah.
about Islamic finance. People don't understand the nuances of Islamic finance. People are financially illiterate to start with.
Right.
So there's a lack of literacy in Canada when it comes to finances, budgets, that kind of stuff. Not like investment banking stuff. I'm just talking about like,
Just normal everyday.
yeah, like how do you save and how do you invest and how do you spend money and make sure you spend less than you make? Like
Rich dad, poor dad.
that's financial literacy. Then you need to layer that with Islamic finance. Oof. Like that's now it's like next level type stuff. And if you don't have that foundation, it's very difficult for you to build on it, right? And this goes back to when we first launched Menzel, and we're like, we figured it out, we cracked the nut, we solved it. Let's just launch and just sit back. And then we started to get like these concerns or these questions around like, well, is an RSP halal? And we're like, what do you mean? Of course, an RSP is halal. It's just an account with some tax benefits. Of course, it's halal. They didn't even know what an RSP was, let alone the benefits of an RSP and how you can actually invest in an RSP in a Sharia compliant way. So we said we solved the problem of investing in a Sharia compliant way, but thinking that they knew what an RSP was, and we had to actually kind of turn it back and be like, and step back and be like, guys, there's an education process that's required here that we need to do as a team at Menzel so that they understand what these products are and then know how to use those products with our products. So that is a big focus of ours because just in like generally speaking, financial literacy is very low amongst Canadians. And I would say probably maybe even lower amongst Canadian Muslims, just because they've excluded themselves from participating in the financial services industry to start with, right?
It's true. It is true. Like, especially when you take a look at Pakistan, Middle East, they're very conscious about where their money is going, right? At least in, I would say the good parts of Pakistan. But especially in Canada, from what I've seen, it's very, I wouldn't say hard, but it's a lot less common for people to be more educated on spending and saving. Like me, for example, I'm not the best person to go to when it comes to saving. I spend too much on food anyway, right?
Yeah,
But you know, it is something that I didn't even take into consideration when considering halal finance. The fact that people need to be knowledgeable about halal finance, but before that, you just got to be knowledgeable about finance in general,
absolutely.
right? And your point on Canadian Muslims being a little bit against it because, and I've realized this with my friends as well. When you mention the name finance, right? Oh no, haram, right? They just throw the word at it, right? Like I have a few friends trying to go into investment banking, corporate banking, whatever it might be. Haram, haram, haram.
Yeah.
And it's important to be able to change that perspective in the sense that rather than splitting these two entities apart, they should be coherent. And we've seen that in other places and other regulations as well. Right now, moving on to that, I want to get to know a little bit about you, right? And of course, before speaking to a CEO, you always have to do research. Now, before I met you at the community iftar, I tried to, learn a little bit about you, right? And I spoke to some people like Abdul Mateen, obviously, who's actually my boss, and then Ikram, Abdullah, many other people. All of them have said you're very, very humble and a really nice guy, right? And
I appreciate that.
keeping, like managing a business that's at this scale, how'd you develop that?
For me, humility is kind of one of the core tenets I adhere to. From the perspective of, I truly believe that humility brings respect at all levels of humanity. And it's not just about the people, but even the environment, right? You want to be conscious about the environment that you're interacting with, whether it's the flora or the fauna and everything requires respect. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this, right? Like we shouldn't even, take a branch off of a tree or take a leaf off of its branch, or, even you see an ant, why step on it, right? Uh, and that humility is a conscious effort to ensure that I stay grounded, to ensure that my interactions with people are perceived and experienced as respectful, mutually, of course. And I look at myself as just here to serve, right? I'm here, appointed by the community to do this on their behalf, really, right? And Allah has given me the strength, the mind, the physical, um, the physical stamina and endurance and perseverance and grit and work ethic to be able to do it. And I want people to see that. I want people to learn from that. I want to be an example of that. And I think that any sort of uh, let's call it Adam's weight, right? As the hadith is called, as the hadith says, Adam's weight of ego is completely annihilated, right? Because as soon as you think that you are smarter than anybody, or better than anybody, or bigger than anybody, it can really get in the way of your performance. It gets in the way of your cause. It gets in the way of your why. Like, why are you doing this? And I think that long term, it just ends up being detrimental. Detrimental to society, detrimental to the organization, detrimental to your friends and family that work around you. I truly don't feel like I'm any different than me or you. We've had our own journeys. We have our own efforts. We've made our own decisions. And my path ended up being this. And everyone else's path ended up being theirs, and that's fine. There's no judgment, right? And so that's kind of why humility is at the core for me, and it constantly reminds me that I'm a nobody, and that's fine in this world of billions, because I am. It's Ramadan, people are doing Umrah, Hajj is around the corner. And anyone that has done Umrah or Hajj, they are reminded of that, right? Because we all put on 2 shrouds of white cloth around our body, and we're, congregating and walking amongst hundreds of thousands of other people. And these are kings, right? These are princes and princesses and queens and heads of states and diplomats and delegates and CEOs of companies and billionaires and millionaires. But we don't know that. Exactly. Right? We don't know that. And everyone's treating each other with respect and humility, and they're engaging, and they're getting to know you. And that's the best part. That's the best part about this religion, is everyone's the same. Doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. Doesn't matter the language you speak. Doesn't matter the food you eat, the clothes you wear. Nothing. We're all the same when we go on pilgrimage, and we're all the same when we go 6 feet under the ground. And so having that perspective, I think, is critical, especially for any entrepreneur that's trying to create a business, especially if they're dealing with the masses, as I like to say, like B2C consumers. And not that it would be any different for B2B, but you're just dealing with less people when it's B2B. Right. So, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I feel, just watching you, I feel it was a little bit of a personal reflection for you as well. It was, certainly. Thank you for bringing that up. But apart, and you brought this up obviously, but I love Islam for the idea that, like you mentioned,
whatever it might be, we're all treated the same, or we should be at the very least, right? There's a famous hadith: no Arab is better than non-Arab, no black is better than white. Doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. You could be, and you know what? I thought about this. You must be familiar with Sheikh Albani as well,
Of
right?
course.
And Sheikh Albani, as many might know, is an Albanian Muslim scholar. Now, when you think of Albania, you don't really think, oh, the most extensive hadith researchers come from there, but you have Sheikh Albani, right? Living testament to that. Now, moving on, another attribute about you, we talked about this briefly as well. You're a risk taker, right?
Mm.
Even leaving your TD job to pursue this full time, it's very admirable, but many do fail in this. How are you able to stay afloat? Not even stay afloat, succeed in this.
Yeah, so there's certain risks, of course, in any business venture that you're going to take on. I think for me, in terms of, with your comment around staying afloat, there were certainly very, very difficult times, financially, non-financially, personally, friends, family, like a lot of people
Right.
that are just like, okay, like it's been 3 years, it's been 5 years,
Mm.
like, why are you still doing this? Or, you know, and I think for me, my reflection has always been, well, this is what I want to do. It makes me happy. It brings me joy. There's impact. There's legacy. I'm affecting thousands, if not tens of thousands of Muslims daily in a positive way. And there's blessings that come from that. And I look at it as like a multiplier effect. The more people that participate in Menzel from a service or product perspective, or even just an engagement between me and them verbally or through a seminar or, some sort of education, they learn something. All of that ties into me saying, this is what I want to continue to do. And I will do whatever it takes to just keep moving. It's very hard, like from day one, to say, well, within this time period, I will make a decision on whether I continue or not. Some people do that. They draw a line in the sand. They make it, arbitrary. And for me, I just look at it as a journey because I reflect a lot and I say to myself, every year, if I were to like write down my goals, Jan 1, and then December 31st, I reflect on those goals and I say, well, what did I achieve? What didn't I achieve? I find that a lot of times there are things that came in throughout the year that wasn't even my goal, but it was a positive impact on the business. And then you say, well, how did that happen? And I could be like, I don't know. Like, it just came, right? Like, the opportunity came out of nowhere. It was unexpected. And I just look at that as like a blessing to the business because if that didn't happen, then it could have changed the trajectory of the business in a negative way. And there are multiple examples of that that I can think of. And so I just look at, the niyyah, the intention is there to create something for the Muslim Ummah, for Muslim Canadians that they can be proud of. And anytime that anyone uses us or interacts with us, that's a blessing that comes and it's multiplied thousands and thousands of times on a daily basis. And so why wouldn't you continue to do that no matter what you're faced with? Because Allah is going to test you. But we know, right, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, right? That He will only test you within your means and your capacity. Like He's not going to test you beyond the limits of your capacity. But what actually happens is those that get tested are actually the ones that are loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do I mean by that? Because if you're not being tested, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually has forgotten about you. And so what happens is, he says, well, I'm not going to test you on this earth. I don't care about you anymore. You're not loved by me. And that's a real problem. Your test comes in the hereafter, in the akhirah. And that's not going to be in heaven. Right? So when you're tested here in the dunya, you should say to yourself, okay, Allah is testing me, and I'm going to go through this test, fine. But just know that you're going to have less of a test in the akhirah, or maybe no test. And maybe all of your hardships are done here, and there's zero hardship there. And the tests get incrementally harder based on your capacity. So when Allah says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, like, you're not going to be tested only within the means of your capacity, but your capacity can actually expand. And I've seen that. You know, the way I was being tested as a 16-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 24 or a 30-year-old or a 35-year-old versus now is way different. Why? Because he's been like prepping me all this time. And he's saying, okay, well, now that you've solved this test, here's a slightly harder one, and then a slightly harder one, or maybe here's multiple at the same time. And he knows that I can handle it. I've built kind of this resistance over time, this restraint over time, to be like, yeah, I've dealt with something like this before. It's a little bit harder, but maybe it requires more dua, more salah, more patience, more maturity, stamina, endurance, all these things I've talked about as well. All of that plays a part in being identified as the person that will that can handle this outcome.
Thank you for mentioning that, because, Doctor, see, like, even for me, when I'm doing these podcasts, and it doesn't even have to be the podcast, anything in my life, right? Unexpected opportunities always arise. And sometimes you're like, what? How did that even, it's out of nowhere, right? And it could be something as small as, like, I'll give you a really small example. There's an exam I barely studied for. Barely. The one day before the exam, I studied for it. Okay. Next day, I go in class. I know every single question, and somehow I got second in the class.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not a smart guy. I'm an absolute, like, you ask any of my friends, any single one of them, even my parents at this point,
Yeah.
right? They'll all tell you otherwise. But alhamdulillah, it's crazy how these unexpected opportunities occur, especially when you're delving into a why that's so strong like yours. And not only strong, because, a lot of bad people have strong whys, but something that's deep rooted in something that's inherently good. Now, with that, Doctor, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're most welcome.
I really do appreciate your insights. I'm glad that this was, a bit of a reflection for you. Certainly was for me, right? I'm glad this felt like a real podcast. So thank you so much for sharing your insights.
You're most welcome. Thanks for having me.
And of course, KKC viewers, please tune into Manzil. Search that up. I'll drop the link in the description down below. On Instagram, it's going to be Get Manzil, and then you can search that up. And obviously, subscribe to this YouTube channel. A lot of you aren't for some reason, okay? But till then, thank you so much for tuning in.